I've had the opportunity to interview Mike Portnoy a couple of times over the years, once for our film Rush Beyond the Lighted Stage, and then for our series Metal Evolution. And it's one thing that probably many of you know about Mike is the man has a lot of opinions, including what is progressive and even trying to define that elusive metal word, epic. Slates up.
Speeding.
Mike Portnoy, take one. What was your first exposure to what we might call progressive rock or progressive music? Who was the band that kind
Well, progressive rock or progressive metal? Because there's definitely two different worlds.
Let's start with progressive rock.
I think progressive rock can probably be pinpointed. Well, some would say Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles was the first like art rock album, and that was '67. Then came things like the Moody Blues and Procol Harum. But a lot of people pinpoint the first progressive rock album as In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson, which was '69. And from there came Yes, Genesis, ELP, and those were the real big prog rock bands of the early '70s.
Was there a particular album that was really inspiring and eye-opening for you?
In the Court of the Crimson King was the one where you were really hearing a lot of mellotrons and some great musicianship, extended instrumentation and orchestration. But I mean, if I had to pick a personal album, I think Close to the Edge by Yes was the one. And you could really, I mean, some of the Genesis albums were truly important as well, but Close to the Edge by Yes was the one where all five musicians were just like the best at what they did.
Right.
And the composition on that album, you have an album with just 3 songs, 3 epics. It was a true prog statement.
What attracted you to this kind of music? Like, what really drew you to this style?
For me, the immediate attraction to progressive rock or prog was the musicianship. It was always about the musicianship. Every musician was playing their instrument to the fullest capability. And that was the thing that would draw me in. And then once listening, then I would start to appreciate the orchestration and the writing and the composition and the epic nature of the songs. But it was always the musicianship that caught my attention.
And what was it like being a metalhead at Berkeley?
I wanted to be this great musician and go to Berkeley and learn as much as I could. But once I got there, I was the only kid walking down the hallways with a Flotsam and Jetsam T-shirt.
Yeah.
So I definitely stood out like a sore thumb as this thrash kid from Long Island stuck in this world of jazz at Berkeley. Metallica had just come out, Anthrax, Megadeth, Slayer, SOD, Overkill, Testament, Exodus. I was listening to all that stuff. But at the same time, I still had this prog rock side, listening to Rush and Yes and everything. Once I formed Dream Theater with John Mayong and John Petrucci, there we were, in this practice room at Berkeley while everybody else was playing jazz standards. We were jamming, Iron Maiden and Rush tunes. So we stuck out like a sore thumb. I mean, if you go to Berkeley now, there's a lot of metalheads and these Dream Theater kids, wannabes that go there because they want to learn to be like Dream Theater. Yeah. But when we were there, we stuck out like a sore thumb.
So do you think by the time you guys started to gain momentum, there seemed to be a bit of a void there in this progressive metal style?
Absolutely. I think Dream Theater's success was because we were in the right place at the right time, or I should say the right place at the wrong time, because nobody else was really doing what we were doing. And even though Dream Theater started in '85, our first album was in '89, we didn't really break till '92 with our second album. And in '92, really all of the bands from the '80s, like Metallica, Maiden, Queensryche, they were starting to stray to more commercial stuff. Metallica was doing the Black Album, Queensryche was doing Empire. So by the time Dream Theater kind of broke through in the early '90s, the prog metal bands weren't really doing it anymore. You had the underground bands like Fates Warning and Watchtower, but none of them had a major label push. And really the mainstream stuff in the metal world was starting to turn to the more grunge stuff. So when Images and Words came out in '92, suddenly here we were on a major label, a metal band, but with real prog elements, and I guess it spoke to people. I remember people saying they first heard Dream Theater on the radio with Pull Me Under in 1992, and it was just a breath of fresh air from everything else that radio was playing at that time.
That concept of epic always seems to come up in conversations about progressive music, and I would argue that your music has an epic quality to it. I mean, does that term mean anything to you? And if so, what does it mean to have an epic approach to your music?
To me, an epic song, first of all, has to exceed the 8-minute mark, preferably the 10 or 12-minute mark. But I'll forgive I'll count an 8-minute song. You know, something like, "Stairway to Heaven." Okay, that's epic, but it's not epic the way that us prog people know epics. But to me, a true epic is something that has length. It's got peaks and valleys, ups and downs, musical, twists and turns. Something that defies traditional arrangements. Not verse, chorus, solo out. You want to have different musical passages. And to me, all of my favorite songs, the classics, are the ones that are epics.
What are the strains that you guys have put yourself through to kind of perform this music?
I've had countless physical incidents through the years as a result of pushing myself musically. I mean, I've one time in Munich back in '97, I just bit off more than I could chew with a fill, and I felt like a muscle sprain. I thought I just pulled a muscle, and I looked down, and this hand was completely twisted and facing upward. I literally dislocated my wrist, and it was facing the other way, and I just turned blue, and and I had to continue. Luckily, it was the last song of the show, but I had to continue playing the rest of the show Rick Allen style, but which isn't easy for Dream Theater music. And then immediately went off to the hospital and had to play the rest of the tour in a sling.
How had things changed for you after Images and Words in terms of the momentum and the attention and the touring and the growth of the band? How did things change for you guys after that point?
Well, after Images and Words, we spent a couple of years, living in the shadow of Pull Me Under's success, and the record company on the Awake album and the Falling Into Infinity album was constantly chasing the next single, and we were not supposed to be a singles band. It was never part of our game plan. So, for a couple of albums after Images and Words, it was tough playing the industry game, and upon almost packing it in and breaking up as a result of that, we finally put our foot down in '99 and told everyone to get out of our way, or else we're going to break up, and that's going to be the end of it. We started producing our own albums, no more outside producers. We told the record company, you're not going to hear a single note till the record is done. If you don't like these terms, then we're done. Otherwise, we're not interested in doing this anymore unless these are the way we're going to do it. So once we started regaining all of our independence with Scenes from a Memory, which ended up being a great success. It proved a lot to the record company at the time that we could play by our own rules. All the remaining albums through the 2000s, it was just an uphill climb, and we suddenly were able to write our own rules, and then a little later into our career hooked up with Roadrunner Records, and were able to have their support and understanding of what we did. And those last 10 years for me with the band were incredibly productive and satisfying, in terms of artist development.
Last question, and I've asked everyone from Iggy Pop to Billy Gibbons to Bill Ward. What does heavy metal music mean to you? What does it do for you, and why continue to love it?
Metal music, it's always been summed up to me just by 3 words: balls and chunk. Like, I want to hear music that has balls and chunk. I love progressive music. I love listening to Yes and Pink Floyd and Genesis, but at the end of the day, I want to just crank up something loud and fucking headbang, play air guitar and air drums, and I need that adrenaline.